Story. She made me apologize to the man destroying our relationship. The wine glass was still spinning when I got to my feet. And I want you to understand something before I say anything else. I hadn't touched it. She had slammed it down so hard the base twirled like it was desperate to escape the table. Just like I was desperate to escape that moment. The restaurant had gone quiet around us. The kind of quiet that only happens when strangers sense something deeply private shattering in a very public place. You could feel their sideways glances like static crawling across your skin. And right there, sitting across from me like the smug centerpiece of our entire unraveling, was Marcus. Elbows propped on the white linen. Shirt 2 sizes too tight for the occasion. Wearing the kind of confidence that only comes from never once caring who you leave bleeding behind you. He looked me dead in the eye, and he smirked. Then he reached for another piece of bread like this was his date. Like I was the intruder. You embarrassed him, she whispered through clenched teeth, cheeks burning red in a way that had absolutely nothing to do with the wine. You need to apologize. I want you to sit with that for a second. Not a request. A demand. She was demanding I apologize to the man who had hijacked the night I had planned for us. 2 hours earlier, this was supposed to be our night. I had booked that table a month in advance. A quiet window seat, candlelight, the whole thing. I hadn't told her, but I was going to say something important that evening. Something that felt like the beginning of us choosing each other all over again. She walked in 15 minutes late, smiled and said, "Oh, Marcus is joining us. Hope you don't mind." And she sat down like she hadn't just detonated a grenade in the middle of everything. Marcus took the seat where the candlelight should have been. No explanation. No heads up. Just him. So when she stood there demanding I apologize to him, I laughed. Not because any of it was funny. I laughed because I genuinely could not believe I had let things get this far. I laughed because I had been telling myself for months that I was imagining things. That I was being dramatic. That I was overreacting. And standing there in that restaurant, it all came crashing down on me at once. I stood up. I did not yell. I did not cry. I did not flip the table, though something inside me desperately wanted to. I just spoke loudly enough for both of them to hear every single syllable. Choose, right now, him or me. Her mouth fell open. She hadn't expected me to have a spine. Marcus looked mildly entertained. Like I had just added a little spice to what was otherwise a boring evening for him. I didn't wait for her answer. I turned and walked out into the cold. Heart hammering. Hands ice cold. Questions screaming inside my skull so loud I could barely hear the city around me. I made it across the street before my legs gave out on a bench. I sat there staring at my own reflection in the dark restaurant window. Watching them in there. Her hands fidgeting with the napkin. Marcus stretching back like he'd just been handed a trophy. I waited like an idiot for her to come after me. 5 minutes. Then 10. I even reached for my phone once. Thumb hovering over her name. But I didn't press it. Instead I scrolled to a photograph I had taken earlier that day. One I was never supposed to see. One I had been carrying in my pocket like a wound I wasn't ready to show anyone. Because this hadn't come out of nowhere. I had been noticing things for weeks. Small slips. Stories that didn't quite line up. The moment she changed her phone lock screen from a photo of us to some quote about freedom and authenticity. I wasn't proud of what I did next. But I checked her shared photo album with Marcus. She had forgotten to turn off syncing. And there it was. The two of them at a rooftop bar 3 weeks ago. Her in the green dress she always told me she only wore for me. His hand suspiciously close to her waist. But it wasn't even the photo itself that gutted me. It was the caption she wrote underneath it. To the nights we never have to explain. She thought it was private. She thought I would never see it. I had kept it locked in my phone like a bruise I kept pressing. Sitting on that bench, I stared at it until the pixels blurred. I wasn't angry in the way movies show you. No yelling. No punching walls. I was just exhausted. Tired of begging for scraps of attention. Tired of pretending I was okay being a backup option in my own relationship. Then her messages started arriving. Nathan, where did you go? I didn't respond. Nathan, you embarrassed me. I blinked at the screen. Marcus says you're being immature. We were just trying to include you. Include me. In my own date night. I typed back, you made your choice. I'll come get my things tomorrow. No question mark. No softening. No more trying to hold together something built on sand. Then I turned off my phone. That night I lay on my friend's couch staring at the ceiling fan, watching the shadows it threw across the walls, replaying every moment where I had let things slide. Every time I'd told myself I was being paranoid. Every time I'd believed her when she said, you're imagining it. I wasn't imagining anything. And I think some part of me had known that for a very, very long time. In the morning, when I arrived at her apartment to collect my things, her door was already open, and Marcus was standing inside. He was leaning against her kitchen counter, one ankle casually crossed over the other, drinking from her favorite mug, the one with the cartoon octopus on it. The one she bought on the trip we took together to Valverde. The same trip where she told me she wanted to build a future with me. He looked up and saw me standing there, and he grinned, not surprised, not startled, like he had been waiting. I asked where she was. He shrugged and said she'd been crying all morning. You really did a number on her last night. I wanted to laugh. I did a number on her. And then she appeared in the hallway behind him, wearing one of his shirts. Not mine, his. She flinched when she saw me, eyes red, lips dry, like she'd been crying but hadn't finished. I told her I came to get my things. This time louder, more certain. Marcus leaned forward and said we could all talk like adults. That was it. That was the moment everything inside me flipped. Because I realized this wasn't just betrayal. It was arrogance. They hadn't expected consequences. They expected me to nod. Accept. Apologize for making things uncomfortable. There was no shame in that apartment. Only arrogance. I reached slowly into my coat pocket. Both of them watched me like I was pulling out a weapon. Instead, I set an envelope on the counter. I told Marcus to give it to her. Told them it wasn't a threat. Just truth. Something neither of them were used to. Then I looked at her one last time. You won't have to worry about me anymore. Just make sure he's still around when it's his turn to get bored. I walked out. Inside that envelope wasn't a goodbye letter. It was a printed copy of her rooftop photo, with one line written beneath it in red ink. To the nights we never have to explain until now. I thought that was the end. It wasn't. 3 days later, her sister Camille called me. Camille had never been in the middle of anything between us. She was the type who smiled tightly at dinners and kept her head down when things got tense. So when her name appeared on my screen, I almost let it ring out. Something made me answer. She was breathless, like she'd been pacing. She told me Natalie had posted something that morning and deleted it an hour later. A photo, the two of them, in bed. The caption read, "No more secrets, just us." But that wasn't even why she was calling. The real reason was this. Natalie was rewriting history. She was telling people I had been controlling, emotionally unstable, that I was the reason she and Marcus had gotten close. She wasn't just moving on. She was erasing me, repainting the wreckage like I had been the one who lit the match. And then Camille said something else, something that made my hand go cold. She said Natalie, drunk the night before, had told her that Marcus had been sleeping over for months, and that I already knew, that I just hadn't cared enough to stop it, that I was too spineless to do anything about it. I spilled water from the glass in my hand without even noticing. Spineless. That's what she believed. I had been the placeholder, the one she could quietly humiliate and still count on to forgive her. And the worst part, the part that made me feel physically sick, was that she wasn't entirely wrong. I had known on some level for weeks, maybe months, and I had pretended not to because I thought if I loved her hard enough she would stop choosing him. That if I stayed patient enough she would see me again. That night I sat in front of my laptop scrolling through her social media. The photo was gone, but the damage was done. Friends leaving vague, congratulatory comments. some tagging Marcus in jokes that turned my stomach. No guilt anywhere in the frame. Just celebration. Like I had never existed. But buried in the comments was a name I recognized immediately. Serena, Marcus's ex-girlfriend. Her comment was 4 words long. Funny how history repeats. I clicked her profile. My hands were sweating. Her feed was private except for one public post from 2 weeks ago. A screenshot of a text message. His words. Trust me. She's just a backup plan. Always has been. I read it 10 times before it settled in my chest like a stone dropping into deep water. He wasn't just using me. He was using Natalie too. She wasn't special to him. She was temporary. The woman who had treated me like I was disposable was now the one being played by the man she'd replaced me with. And she had absolutely no idea. I messaged Serena that night. Just introduced myself. Said I thought we'd both been used. Nothing more. She responded in 5 minutes. You have no idea how deep this goes. Within an hour we were on a video call. 2 complete strangers connected only by the same mistake. She looked the way you look after you've been lied to so many times you stop trusting your own memory. She told me Marcus had a pattern. A long one. Natalie was the 3rd woman he had pulled away from a failing relationship through manufactured intimacy and perfectly timed emotional rescue. He has this way of making you feel like your partner is the problem, she said. He becomes the solution. He builds this emotional affair brick by brick until you slip. And by the time you realize what he actually is, you've already dismantled everything else in your life. She wasn't bitter when she said it. She was clinical, like someone who had practiced the words until they no longer burned. The worst part, she said, leaning closer, he never stays. Once the relationship is his, he loses interest. He needs the chase, not the person. Then she showed me the recordings. Screenshots, voice messages, a screen recording of him on the phone with someone, his voice low and certain. She still thinks I'm keeping her busy. I'll get the file. Just make sure she never sees the transaction. I've got her wrapped up. She thinks this is love. The date on that recording. 2 weeks before the restaurant. Before Natalie told me to apologize to him. This wasn't just infidelity. This wasn't just manipulation. Marcus was working with someone. A man named Carson. And Natalie's accounts were being used without her knowledge as financial bridges. She wasn't just a conquest. She was being set up. I gathered everything. The screenshots, the recordings, the router logs, copied it all to a drive and mailed it anonymously to her office. No note. No signature. Just a label on the envelope. Truth, before it swallows you too. 2 days later she appeared at my door. Soaked from the rain. Mascara streaked. Hair tangled. And her first words were not, "I'm sorry." She looked at me and whispered, "Why didn't you protect me from him?" I stood in the doorway and let that sentence hang in the air between us. She hadn't come back to take responsibility. She'd come back because she was scared. And alone. And the story she had written for herself had collapsed. I stepped aside to let her out of the rain. She looked around my apartment like a stranger in a place she used to know. I guess it had changed. The framed photo of us from the autumn gone. Her blanket packed in a box. The little clay mug she made at that pottery class. Shattered weeks ago in a moment of weakness I still half regret. She told me she didn't know what he was. I told her I had begged her to see it. I had tried to talk about boundaries and she called me controlling. I had tried to explain how it felt to be constantly sidelined and she called me insecure. I had stood there while she handed everything we had to him. Wrapped up and smiling. And now she wanted me to be her shield. You didn't fall into this, I said. You chose it. Repeatedly. You defended him. You told me to apologize to him. Do you remember that? She didn't answer. She looked like someone trying to find solid ground and discovering there wasn't any. I asked her why she was here. She looked up and said, "Because I don't know who I am without you." And that was the moment I understood everything completely. She hadn't come back for me. She had come back because Marcus had already moved on. Because the applause had died. Because shame had finally, quietly, found its way in. I was not her love story. I was her safety net. And I was done. I'm not your cure. You threw that away the night you let him sit across from me and called it inclusion. I opened the door. She stepped out slowly. For the first time, she didn't argue, didn't plead. She just walked. A week later, a private investigator named David Reeves was standing at my door alongside her with a folder. Carson Vellum, the man Marcus had been working with, was already under federal investigation. Corporate fraud, identity laundering, the full picture. The audio file I had found was the piece that locked it all into place. Natalie's accounts had been used as financial bridges without her knowledge or consent. She had been set up from the very beginning. She stood in my doorway, eyes rimmed red not from crying but from something deeper. Humility, maybe, or the hollow feeling of finally seeing clearly. I didn't come to blame you, she said, voice cracking. I came to thank you. You didn't just walk away. You left the truth behind. She told me she was leaving. New city, new job, clean rebuild. And then she said she was sorry. Not because she got caught, but because she finally understood what she had lost. I gave a slight nod. I hope you find peace. After they left, I sat in my apartment in a silence that felt different from all the other silences. Not heavy, not hollow, light. I had walked through something that should have destroyed me, and somehow it hadn't. Weeks passed. No messages. No chows. Just quiet that slowly began to feel like mine. I started going for morning walks. I called people I hadn't spoken to in months. I picked up my old camera, something I hadn't touched in years, and started shooting again. Felt like breathing for the first time in a long time. One Saturday, at a park on the east side of the city, I was crouched down getting a shot of light through the trees when a voice said, "You're in my way." I looked up. A woman was standing there, grinning with the kind of ease you only have when you're not performing anything. I said she'd better hope I made her look good. She laughed. Her name was Diane, graphic designer, 2 dogs. No one named Marcus in her orbit. We talked for an hour without either of us noticing the time passing. When we exchanged numbers, I didn't feel the familiar dread. I didn't feel the need to explain my past or apologize for the damage someone else had done to me. I felt ready. Genuinely, quietly, completely ready. Maybe that's the thing no one tells you about heartbreak. Sometimes it doesn't end in fireworks, or revenge, or some perfectly satisfying confrontation. Sometimes the most powerful ending is simply choosing yourself. And then, one quiet morning in a park, choosing to begin again.